Okay, good morning everybody. It is 11 o'clock, so we like to start on time. Welcome to the meeting. As usual, this will be broadcast live via the county's website. It'll be archived so you can catch up later if you've missed anything. Usual thing for members, please remember to switch your microphone on and off so it enables members of the public to hear us. I've got apologies for absence from Byron Rhodes and Ernie White. And then one other thing I need to tell you, I need to alter the order of business so we can consider the environment transport items directly after item 5 on the agenda. So the two MTFS reports will be first, followed by items 10, 11, 12 and 13. This will enable Phil, the director, to attend a meeting on rail stuff, which I'm supposed to be going to, but I've got to chair this meeting, but he's going to go instead. So if you're all okay with that, I know it'll be a bit hard to follow with the amount of papers we've got, but I'll allow a little bit of extra time so people can keep up. Are you all happy with that? Yes, they are. That's good. Right, so next agenda item is minutes, pages 5 to 16. I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2017 be taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Urgent items. I've agreed to accept an urgent item concerning the Council's early support and inclusion services. The item is urgent because of most recent developments arose after the agenda for this meeting and been circulated, and I think it needs to be considered as soon as possible. If we're all agreed, which I think we are, we'll take that at the end of the agenda. Moving swiftly on, declarations of interest. I have Mr. Payne.
Leader, can I declare an interest in what is currently item 10 on the agenda, notwithstanding what you've just said about the alteration of the agenda? That will, I think, become item 6, and I'll leave the room on that item. Usual declaration, I have an interest in a taxi company locally. Thanks.
Mrs. Posnett.
I'd just like to declare an interest on what is item 17 on the agenda as a member of Melton Borough Council. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll allow time for you to leave the meeting, Blake, and then we'll call you back in after we've done 10. Right, MTFS 1718, monitoring period 4 on investment proposals. Chris Tambini is going to introduce it, and then because Byron Rhodes, who has primary responsibility for resources, is absent, Richard Shepherd, who's First Secretary to the Treasury, if Byron's the Chancellor, will be speaking to it. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you. This report sets out the period 4 revenue and capital monitoring position. In terms of revenue, we're overall forecasting a small underspend of 300,000. However, there are some real pressures within Children and Family Services, and these relate to the Children's Social Care budget and increased numbers of placements. We're currently forecasting a £5.2 million overspend in that area. This is, however, offset by a £5 million or nearly £5 million underspend in terms of lower demand than expected for adult services. The report does set out in a little bit of detail the steps the CFS department are putting in place to try and contain the overspend. Even so, it is a major concern, and I must admit it is part of a national trend with a number of authorities also experiencing the same pressures. In terms of capital, the programme shows relatively small slippage of about 4%, and the details are set out in the report. The report also releases some funding from the inflation contingency and allocates it to enable a faster response to fixing potholes and also better management of school parking issues. The recommendations are set out on the order paper.
Thank you. Richard first, then you in a bit, Blake.
Sorry, thank you for reminding me. Sorry about that. I'm happy to move the proposed motion on the green order paper, A, B, C, as set out. Chris has introduced the item. I just want to add one thing, if I may, and it refers to part of the appendix we have. It's page 11, Appendix B. I wanted us to take the opportunity to mention that despite all the gloomy news, sometimes saving money can go hand in hand with a service improvement. So I'm looking at, let's have a look, looking at page 12 of the appendix. about the Service Pressures Action Plan. And on page 12 we see, by providing a family-based alternative, not only is there a direct benefit for the children to be within a more normal situation with potentially better long-term outcomes, but also a significant cost saving. So we hear a great deal about the need for reducing costs, and we also obviously contemplate some of the undesirable effects, but just sometimes the two things can go hand in hand, saving money and a service improvement. Thank you, Chairman.
I will you moved the recommendations, didn't you, Richard? I will second them and just make a couple of points. The pressures in children and family services is worrying. The expenditure is not out of control, but it certainly is worrying. And I was at the LGA Executive Board yesterday, and a number of other counties were making very similar noises about it, and I made the point to them there that ours, OK with adults, were in control, so we say. But with children's and family services, I did make the point that it's very, very worrying indeed, and the government should seek to address that. I mean, they have given us the money for adult social care, we can increase the council tax, but for Ivan in children and young people services, he's really struggling. And the good news, obviously, I'm really happy about potholes and some highway money, because obviously as a rural member I get plenty of inquiries, shall I say. So first speaker I've got is Blake.
Yes, Leader, I just want to pick up on the point about the proposals contained within the motion around the highways budget, which is to release £0.7 million of a £5 million inflation contingency. I think the report describes what we want to use that money for, but I just want to add some flesh around those two initiatives. The first one is to bring forward proposals to create enforceable zigzag lines outside schools, because children's safety is absolute paramount, and I think all county councillors would have no doubt at some point in time received in their inbox issues pertaining to parking outside schools and the behaviour of some parents and people that drop children off at schools. And whilst the Highways Department work very, very closely with schools, school teachers, as a transport authority to try and help schools to manage these situations, we feel that we can help even further by bringing forward some enforceable zigzags. At the moment, zigzags outside schools aren't enforceable, and unlike double yellow lines where there's an element of being able to drop off, we feel that by bringing powers forward to enforce the zigzags outside schools, we can help schools and teachers manage parking outside schools far better. The second initiative around potholes, we want to bring forward an initiative that is a lot more responsive to our customer needs. I know that you're very keen to deliver outcomes and outputs at this authority, Leader. And whilst we have a very robust schedule of inspections when it comes to potholes, and I think we've got a very enviable and solid story to tell in terms of the reduction of the amount of potholes around Leicestershire, I feel that with this money we can respond much more quickly to members and residents' concerns when they report potholes through our customer service centre. And the ambition is to deal with those potholes that have been reported, notwithstanding the schedule of inspections that we undertake on an annual basis, in a very, very short period of time, perhaps no more than 2 weeks in dealing with those specific potholes that have been reported. And I think that will be welcomed across the county, and we can further demonstrate how our monies are working towards best value in terms of our outputs here. So I urge members to support the motion, not least because of the positive proposals that we intend to bring forward into the Highways Department. Thanks.
Ivan Old.
Thank you, Leader. And it doesn't give me any comfort to be sitting representing the department, with a budget constantly, I'm afraid, overspending. And only yesterday we lost a case at court which involves a cost per week of £5,000 for a mother and a child. Unplanned. We don't know how many weeks that will go on for. But on the other side of the coin, as Richard has pointed out, you can actually make savings. And I am pleased to report to Cabinet that the figure that they previously had of 535 children in care, as of this week, was reassessed at 510 children in care. and that was an outcome probably of what you might describe as an invest to save programme in terms of looking at the possibility of fostering within the wider family. I think the government has got to understand they cannot keep giving additional responsibilities to us and not funding them. If you're already in a cash-strapped position, to suddenly find that you've got ongoing costs for people in your care until under what is known as the staying put scheme, quite frankly, just isn't acceptable. And I've never been able to understand the sense of allowing adult social care a 2% increase on local tax, but not allowing anything for children and young people where the cost pressures are just as great. So I will be supporting the motion on the Green Order paper, and yes, Richard, where we can invest to save, we will do that.
Okay, I have no more speakers. The motion was moved by Richard, seconded by myself. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you. Straight on to another MTFS strategy update. You're going to introduce it again, Chris. Scrutiny Commission considered this on Wednesday, and a draft minute is attached to the order marked 5. Chris.
Thank you. Cabinet received a number of similar financial reports over recent years, and I must admit the financial position continues to be challenging. We're faced with kind of overall flat income and a government grant that will probably disappear in a couple of years, at the same time where demand pressures from demographic changes are actually accelerating. And I don't need to remind Cabinet of the fact our starting position is of a low-funded authority. This means the requirement to make savings when we roll forward the MTFS into another year. And I'll just remind members that each year, when we roll forward the MTFS, brings with it another kind of £15 to £20 million worth of savings. And that has been as high as £30 million for some years. But by the end of this year, the County Council would have saved nearly £180 million from 2010. And by 2021, we expect we need to save another £60 million more. Of that £60 million, we have identified some savings proposals, but we think there will be a gap in the order of 30 to 40 million. And over the autumn, we'll be working up proposals to actually reduce that gap a little bit further. The planning process is set out in paragraph 21 of the report and does include issuing a budget for consultation in December. Finally, the government has issued a prospectus inviting local areas to bid to become a business rate pilot. And we do expect to bid, and we're currently working up proposals with all the district councils, the city and the fire authority. And we do think there could be some financial benefit to all partners from becoming a pilot, although albeit there will be some risk as well. The recommendations are set out on the Green Order paper.
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll remember my red light this time. Yes, I'd like to move the proposals on the Green Order paper under item 5. That's A, B, C, D and E. I'd like particularly to refer to page 30 of our agenda, because it's paragraph 7 and 8 on page 30 that I think really do distill for all of us the situation we're in. I would just like to read out, for the benefit of the webcast really, paragraph 8. It is very unlikely that the Council, when it rolls forward the MTFS to 2021-2022, will be able to identify sufficient savings to bridge the funding gap in the later years. To balance the budget without a significant impact on services will require a major efficiency initiative and a successful outcome to the fair funding campaign. That's what paragraph 8 says. And I'm sorry, Chairman, on this item to be dwelling on this gloomy aspect of what we're discussing this morning, but I think it does need emphasising for everybody, for the public, for our MPs, for the government, for everybody, just what the situation is. And I think paragraph 7 and 8 really do distill the situation for us. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll formally second the motion. Have you got anything you want to add to what he said? I mean, I've read it. Can you emphasise anything, Chris?
I think one figure that kind of brings home the pressures to me, if you look back over the last 15 years, I think there was a 12,000 increase in the numbers of over 80-year-olds. If you look forward over the next 15 years, I think that's 30,000. So the demographic pressures are considerable for the county council. And you look at our income overall, despite the fact council tax is going up, it remains flat. So there's these huge pressures with flat income.
Thank you for that, Chris. Only one thing I wanted to comment. Obviously, I'm keen on going for the business rate pilot. I think if we can get agreement, it would be a really, really good bid, because obviously you'd have the Conservative County Council, Labour City Council, 6 districts, a Conservative, 1 Liberal, and a hung fire authority all bidding in. Any minister, when they look at it, must find it interesting. So I'm hopeful that we can get the deal done and we can bid. Have I got any other speakers? No. So moved by Richard, seconded by myself. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Right, now I'll give you a couple of minutes, because we're not going to do what we said we're going to do. We're going to go straight to item 10, which is Phil. Blake's leaving the room. Just to note, I've received comments from Max Hunt and the Liberal Democrat group. They're attached to the order paper marked 10A and 10B. Phil will introduce this, and then Pam's going to speak to it. And also, I don't want to embarrass you, Phil, but this is Phil's last meeting. It's a shame we couldn't formally thank him at full council, but luckily for you, you'll have left by then. But in the years I've been at this place, Phil, right back to Tommy Thompson, you're the most member-friendly director we've ever had, and that's not just friendly to me, which you're bound to be, but to all members, backbenchers, Labour members, Liberal members. I've never heard anyone have a bad word to say about you. So I'm sorry you're going. I understand why you're going, and good luck, Phil. So having said that, over to you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for those kind words, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to work here. Now, if just take members on to this report, and actually there's been quite a bit of discussion about the financial challenges the Council faces already in this meeting, and the pressures on children and family services, and this is probably more of the same and is directly linked to that. The reason I'm bringing this report is that, as highlighted at paragraph 3, there are significant pressures on our special educational needs transport budgets, meaning that we've had to look seriously at the discretionary elements of that service that we provide. A lot of the service is mandated by government, and that's what we do provide, and that's not what this report is about. This is about the discretionary services in terms of post-16 transport, and in terms of whether we do or don't give low-income exemptions. I think also, just to set the context of the challenges we face, paragraph 20 of the report highlights quite clearly that currently we spend 14.8% of the department's budget on SEN transport. That's risen from about 7.5% 5 years ago. As you can see here, it's forecast, if we don't take any action by 2021, to have risen to 28% of the department's budget. That obviously has a consequential knock-on effect on all the other services that we're trying to provide, such as normal public transport, highways, our waste services, etc. So it has been growing at about 5% a year due to both increasing numbers and increasing complexity of need, and therefore cost of providing those services. So we've looked at it and considered what options are available, and we've come up with 2 options for the discretionary. It is up to us whether we do or don't provide a low-income exemption, as the report highlights at paragraph 25. That ranges from full exemptions as we provide, so providing total free transport post-16, full exemptions for low income in Leicestershire and Norfolk, to other areas like Sheffield who don't provide any exemption. Essex, for example, as a large county, they provide 50%. So we are proposing to go out to consultation on what level of exemption would be appropriate within Leicestershire. And that would be as detailed at paragraph 22. I think the other issue we're looking at as well is, as I say, we don't have a duty to undertake post-16 transport. It is discretionary, and there are other elements, and we've recently introduced personal travel budgets as an optional offer for our up to 16 transport, and have had and the current post-16 transport, and I think the latest figures are 6.1% of parents up to 16 are taking up the personal transport budget, and 15% for those post-16 have already taken it up as an option. The way it works is we effectively give parents a grant based on a mileage rate, and they can make alternative arrangements to transport their child to school as the options potentially are outlined in paragraph 29 of the report. So what we're seeking approval to do is go out to consultation on whether that should actually be our offer. Our standard offer for post-16 transport, SEN transport, would be a personal transport budget. There will always be circumstances, as outlined in paragraph 23, where we might still have to provide traditional transport by exception. So we would look to have that in any policy change, and that will be referenced in the consultation. And given that we are altering what we do for post-16 for SEN transport, we therefore need to consider what we do for post-16 mainstream transport. And again, the option there would be we stop providing post-16 transport, and there's relatively small numbers affected by that, but we would offer a small grant for those pupils who are at mainstream education post-16 who are totally rurally isolated, so there would be fallback position there as well. So what we seek to do is go out to consultation, which would start in September. That will be a 3-month consultation. We'll then analyse the reports and come back next year with the outcome of that consultation and any proposals for amending policy. Should we amend the policy, we then will give up to 12 months notice, which means the new policy would be active from September 2019. I think that's all I need to say. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Phil. Pam?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for that very comprehensive gallop through this report, Phil. Greatly appreciated. This is not an easy decision for any of us to have to make. We have looked at it very carefully, looked at what we have to do statutory and what we do for discretionary reasons, and we believe that we have come up with some options that could be acceptable to a lot of people. The reason we are going out to consultation is that we want to get the views, not just of parents who've got children with special needs, but also other parents about what they think about the transport that we put out for schools, for pupils to go to. Everything's on the table, nothing's been taken off, and it won't be taken off until after the consultation is completed. And I do urge everybody to take part in that consultation and let us have their views, and also ideas if they've got any other ways of thinking that could be done. Thank you. But I do propose the recommendation.
I'm going to second it and say nothing, because obviously this is consultation. We want people's views. I have no other speakers, so Pam's moved the motion, I've seconded the motion. All in favour? Thank you. Consultation it is. Just got to wait for Blake to come back in, because he's leading on this paper. Okay, Blake's back. 11, LTP3, Hinckley Area Project Zone 4, Proposed Transport Improvements. It provides an update on the development of the Local Transport Plan Hinckley Area Project, seeks approval for a revised package of works for Zone 4, scrutiny, what's overview and transport considered this, and a draft minute of what they said is attached to your order paper marked 11. Anne Carruthers, Phil's assistant, will present the report, and then Blake as lead member will speak. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this report updates where we're currently at and seeks approval for moving forward with the Hinckley Area project. Members are aware we've delivered phases 1 to 3 of the project and have been developing phase 4. The actual project is appended as Appendix A, page 195, so there's a plan there to show you those. In looking forward to phase 4, we submitted a bid via the LEP last July, for £11.9 million of local growth funding, a total project value of £16 million. Unfortunately, we heard in March this year we were unsuccessful with that. We have £800,000 available at this point in time to take forward phase 4, and hence went to consultation of the priorities, given that new funding envelope of taking forward Phase 4. That consultation occurred in June this year, and from the responses that came back, we revised our criteria to better fit our strategic objectives and the deliverability aspect. And what we're proposing is appended as Appendix D, and it's on page 205 of your papers, to take forward those with that 800,000 available at this point in time. Final point I would make is that actually, while it's unfortunate we didn't secure that money, we will be bidding to any appropriate pot that comes forward, and we currently have a bid in under the government's National Productivity Infrastructure Fund for 2 junctions which were included in Phase 4, and we await the outcome of that later this year. Thank you.
Yeah, might be lucky there. We've been good with the bids to that pot before, haven't we? Anyway, Blake.
Thank you, Leader. Not a great deal to add to what Anne Carruthers has just told us. I just want to draw members' attention to the scrutiny comments, which are appended to our Green Order paper, item 11. This was an interesting debate at scrutiny, and it's already been said that we've delivered zones 1 to 3. Members might be interested to note that about £12 million worth of investment has gone into the Hinckley project to date. This equates to nearly 31% of the capital budgets that we've spent in the Highways Department, and I believe the population of Hinckley is about 10%. So no one should be under any doubt our commitment to improving the road systems and the road networks within the Hinckley area. My ambition is to see that level of investment and that level of improvement cut across the whole of the county. So we're pretty proud with the achievements to date. Whilst it's not what we'd have liked to spend another £12 million in Hinckley on some major infrastructure improvements as part of this Zone 4. Because of the good management of the project to date, we have managed to create some underspends on those monies, which we are proposing here to put back into the Hinckley on some minor schemes, but it still continues to improve the Hinckley area. So I'm very happy with the proposals, and I'm very happy to move the motion as is stated on the Green Order paper. Leader, thank you.
Thank you. I'm seconding it. We have no other speakers, so moved by Blake, seconded by me. All in favour, please. Thank you. Right, straight to 12 now then. The Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Plan, the HIAMP. We're looking to approve it. Environment and Transport Overview Scrutiny Committee have seen it and commented. Attached to the order paper marked 12A. We've had comments in from Max Hunt, that is. They're appended at 12B. Anne's going to introduce it. Anne.
Thank you. Members are aware that we're changing our approach to how we manage the highway asset. That's driven by a new code of practice from government, maximising the funding we can get from government through their incentive fund and delivering our own MTFS savings. This is a journey. It's not a quick change, but we are on a journey. And page 83 of your papers shows the policy framework under which we're implementing that change. We already have a policy approved and a strategy approved by Cabinet. This is the next stage in this, the HIAMP, the Highway Infrastructure Asset Management Plan. What that plan does is, and it's appended there for your information, it sets out our asset inventory, so what we are actually managing and maintaining across our highway infrastructure. Sets out the condition of that asset, it looks at treatment strategies that may be appropriate based on life cycle modelling, and it considers stakeholder expectations for our maintenance of our highway asset. The plan is moving towards a risk-based approach, which is, the ethos of the government's code of practice, and that's about directing resources to where they're most needed and fundamentally the right treatment at the right time. So that's the most effective use of the resources we have. While maintaining the highway asset is getting more challenging for every highway authority up and down the country, what I would say is Leicestershire starts from a very good position. We have some of the best roads in the country at this point in time, and what we're saying is by implementing this approach, it's about managing to the most appropriate condition that asset within that resource envelope we have. Therefore, the report is seeking approval for the approach as set out in the HIAMP, and also for the next stage in that journey, which is developing the operational procedures, the detail that sits underneath that. Thank you.
Super. Blake?
Thanks, Leader. Just a couple of points. Again, there's a very healthy discussion at the scrutiny panel about this. First and foremost, I just want to remind everyone, we've already adopted the policy. This is the plan as to how we're going to deliver the policy. And it might take some months, maybe some years, to evolve this plan and implement it fully. But nonetheless, if I refer to 12A and the comments of the 12B, my apologies, and the comments sent in to us from the Labour group, there is a request for us to look at the policy and actually spell out on which highways assets we are choosing to adopt when it comes to roundabouts, etc. I just want to remind the Labour group that the policy has already been adopted. This isn't about the policy, it's about the plan. The other major concern, and I think it's already been picked up by Anne, is the notion of the deterioration within the road conditions. I just want to say 2 points. Members will be minded that I came to full council and offered a statement about a survey, the National Highways and Transportation Survey, as to the condition of Leicestershire roads at the last full council meeting. And what that demonstrated is that Leicestershire has the best roads in the country. So what I'd like to point out is that we are starting from a very high base. And the amazing thing is, and I said paradoxically, we've had some serious reductions in monies, but we've managed to buck the trend and actually improve the road conditions. So whilst we're planning for a deterioration, albeit from a very high level, I think with the good management of our from our officers here at Leicestershire County Council, we might well be here perhaps in a couple of years' time with another transportation study proving that we've bucked the trend and actually, in spite of our worst fears, we've actually managed to maintain or even improve the road conditions. So I'm happy with the plan, and I'm prepared to support the motion as appended to the Green Order paper. Leader, thank you.
Very good. And I'm seconding it.
Leader, can I just say one?
Yes, Blake?
One final thing. Before we move on to the next item agenda, the Director of Highways, I think it's his last Cabinet meeting he'll be attending, and I just wanted to put on record on behalf of myself and as lead member for the department, my thanks to you, Phil Crossland, for your stewardship of the department. We've just spoken about the outcomes, the improvements that we've seen across Leicestershire because of your stewardship. And I have to say, we have a highly knowledgeable, outcome-focused director, and he will be a loss to the people of Leicestershire. And can I thank you on behalf of the Cabinet, if the Leader will allow me, for your service and for all your support. Thank you very much.
I did actually formally thank him when you were outside, but he
I'll take it
he
twice.
doesn't mind being thanked 3 times. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favour? That's great. Okay, 13, permit scheme for street works and road works. Approval to implement a permit scheme. Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny have looked at this. They're attached, marked 13. Over to you, Anne.
Fine, thank you very much. This report seeks approval to implement a permitting scheme for roadworks and streetworks under the Traffic Management Act 2004. Our current system for managing roadworks is what we would describe at best a passive system. We require notification from statutory undertakers that they're going to undertake roadworks, but there's limited control that we can have through that system. Therefore, this proposal gives us a number of advantages over the current system. The details, the nitty-gritty details, are in Appendix A and B of your papers. It applies to the statutory undertakers, developers, and to ourselves as a highway authority. So in terms of the utilities in particular, they see that as a benefit because there's a level playing field and there's an element of equity in the system. Anybody undertaking works within the highway has to acquire a permit before any works are undertaken. There is a charge for that. That charge covers our costs as well as overheads, etc. It's not about making a surplus, it's about covering costs, which the previous scheme did not. And we can apply conditions to that permit. That allows us to control where it happens, when it happens, the duration, the materials, the inspection regimes, etc., and gives us a much better level of ability to enforce where, unfortunately, things don't go right. There is an exemption for our own works, anything under 60 minutes in duration, so where we're on a rolling activities such as gully cleansing, etc., we don't have to apply. But beyond that, we fully participate in the scheme and it applies to ourselves. There is the ability to enforce and apply fixed penalty charges. We've consulted according to the guidelines, including the Secretary of State, and responses we received were purely of an operational nature, and we've amended the proposals as appropriate according to those responses. The objectives are less congestion on the network because we are coordinating those roadworks in a much more proactive way to minimise congestion and disruption for the travelling public out there. If approved by Cabinet today, the next steps will be a trial in November and full rollout February next year.
Very good. Blake.
Yeah, once again, this is all about listening and responding to our residents and our road users. I'm fully supportive of this scheme, as are the scrutiny body that we went to last week, and their comments are noted and appended to this order paper. There's not a great deal to add to what Anne's just said. It's about controlling the roadworks and trying to minimise the blight that we all put up with throughout the summer months. We accept that necessary maintenance and work needs to be done on the underground utilities, etc. But again, there's more we believe we can do to be able to control that for the benefit of the road users and the residents of Leicestershire. So fully supportive of the motion. I move that we accept.
That's great. I'll second, and then I've got Richard.
Yeah, Chairman, this is incredibly timely for my division, with A47 running through the middle of it. Recently, there's some traffic lights on a junction with 3 ways. It has added 2 or 3 miles of traffic back, right the way through LFE, right out into the countryside. And the people who are on the parish council talking to me in the week, they just said this is not common sense. There's no work going on. And it's one of those examples where we're trying to... They've got a job to do, but it's incredibly frustrating when the utilities are not taking any account of when rush hour takes place. So I certainly will be reporting this back to LFE Parish Council, and they should be pleased to see this coming up.
Do you want to speak, Phil?
If I could just pick up Mr. Blunt's point, I think that's true because there were some works on there just as a way of supporting this proposal on the A511. Severn Trent have been doing some works at the roundabout on Colville, which we didn't know about without any licence. Our current power is we can find them, I think it's £80. Under this, it's £300 a day. So, it will hopefully focus the utilities a bit more. Thank you.
Yes, I'm all in favour of that. Well, moved by Blake, excuse me, seconded by me, all in favour. Great, thank you. You're done now then, Phil. Good luck. See you later.
Item 6.
I've got the draft corporate assets.
Yeah, item 6.
What's he sitting there for then?
No, Paul, it's not you.
Nice to see you, Paul, but unless you want to speak to the draft corporate asset investment fund fund strategy, which I imagine you don't, you can sit there with young Tambini. Okay, back. Yeah, we'll sit back with a normal running order, and it is what it is. Scrutiny Commission has looked at this. Draft minute attached to marked paper 6. Chris is going to introduce it, then over to Richard. Chris.
Thank you. This report seeks Cabinet approval for the corporate asset management strategy. I previously set out the extremely difficult financial position being faced by the County Council. And this report sets out a fairly ambitious plan to grow the corporate asset investment fund so we can generate income to reduce the need for future savings cuts, service cuts. The County Council has always held a significant portfolio of income-generating assets, mainly farmed and industrial premises. And this strategy focuses on developing this further through a combination of both developing and purchasing property. And the target rate of return is 7%. The strategy is not without risk, but it will be mitigated through having a kind of strong governance framework, and this is set out in detail within the strategy. We will also seek to minimise any borrowing, and actually the initial purchases that are set out in paragraph 28 do not require any borrowing. The recommendations are set out on the Green Order paper, and it is worth noting that Scrutiny Commission were supportive when they considered this report.
Thank you. Richard Shepherd first.
Thank you, you, Chairman. I'm happy to move the motion as on the Green Order paper. I think Chris has highlighted the essential points, including the absence of borrowing, and I'm pleased to see that the scrutiny was in agreement, so I'm happy to move it, Chairman.
Good. And Richard Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second it, having been involved in the process since you appointed me. It's incredibly sensible policy. As you say, there is some risk, but the investments I've seen that are outlined in the report on paragraph 28 all seem very sound.
Okay, nothing further to add. Moved and seconded. All in favour? Very good. Thank you. Right, back to you now then, Paul. Funding requirements to deliver the Ofsted Continuous Improvement Plan. Advises members of the work which has been undertaken in response to the Ofsted inspection which took place December last year. Seeks approval for the allocation of additional resources to deliver the improvements. Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny have looked at this earlier in the week and its comments are attached to your order paper marked 7. Paul, who is the Director of Children and Family Services, will introduce, and then Ivan Old, who's the lead member, will comment. Paul.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the slight mistake there. Yes, members will remember that we had our inspection at the end of last year. It was a very intensive inspection, went on over about 4 weeks. As a result of that inspection, the authority was classed as requires improvement to achieve good, and the report made 17 recommendations. Those recommendations were included in an action plan called the Ofsted Continuous Improvement Plan, and that was presented to Cabinet in March of this year. Since then, we've been working to put proposals in place to actually deliver that continuous improvement plan. And the proposals that have come today are added to the £500,000 worth of investment that was agreed as part of the MTFS last year, and will allow us to achieve a positive resolution to the 17 recommendations that are actually in the report. If members refer to page 49, paragraph 20, that highlights the main areas where the investments are going. The detail is contained within Annex C, precisely what all those investments are, but they are mainly around the areas of achieving manageable caseloads, providing sufficient management oversight, meeting our statutory requirements, ensuring good standards of safe practice, developing, supporting staff to develop professionally, meeting legal cost pressures, and promoting the development of our interagency partnership working. We believe by making that investment, it will allow the authority, as I say, to address the recommendations in the report and achieve a standard of practice in line with what Ofsted would class as being good. Simply, I think I'll stop at that point.
Very
Take
good.
any questions.
Ivan.
Thank you, Leader. And obviously, we would have liked to have had a good outcome from the Ofsted inspection. It's nice to know that we were not classified as inadequate, and that if we do these measures, there's a very good chance that next time round we will get that good classification that we're seeking. I was present at scrutiny on Monday when the report was discussed at length. There is in the appendices a whole series of aims set out, and Paul knows, because we've already talked about this, that I want to see some of those aims translated into smart targets that are time related, and that will also meet one of the concerns from the scrutiny committee. I think it's a very well put together plan. I've watched the process as Paul and his colleagues have worked together to put this in place, and I'd recommend to Cabinet that we support it.
Me too. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to second that, Chairman. I think the papers before us and the comments made show why the growth is needed, and I therefore support it.
You need to switch your microphone off, Richard.
Sorry.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 8, seeks approval to consult on the removal of the residential facilities at Maplewell Hall Special School. Pages 51 to 56. So it's over. Are you doing this? Oh, Paul's doing it. Okay, Paul.
Okay. Members will be aware that we have been significantly overspending on our high needs block element of the dedicated schools grant that we achieve every year. And in order to bring the spend back into line with the budget, we're looking at various adjustments. The proposal that's come forward today is to move a residential facility that's been operating in Maplewell Hall School for a number of the young people who attend that school. I think the significant things to note about this, that most of the young people, or all of the young people that are using that facility, don't have an education, health and care plan, which is one of the basic plans that you'd have for us to actually provide services to those young people. So unfortunately, on the basis of that, we feel that we need to close that facility to make sure we can bring the budget back into line and make sure our resources are actually targeted towards those young people in greatest need. So the proposal today is to go out to consultation on this closure. That will go on, start by the end of September for 6 weeks, and then as a result of that consultation, we'll bring the results of that consultation back to Cabinet in November, and then on to a scrutiny committee as well. So as part of that, we'll be talking to local communities, other stakeholders, I'm sure parents as part of that. I think one of the things I want to stress to Cabinet today is that in that process, if any of the children or families come forward and ask for an assessment, we will undertake an assessment of that young person's needs, and we will apply services as appropriate to those needs. So there should be no children who should suffer as a result of this that would meet our requirement for eligibility of services. I'm not suggesting that there's not a reduction in the service, but clearly these days we have to target our service to those in greatest need, and that's via an eligibility criteria that we actually apply. So I think that is a very important point for us to remember as part of this process. The other element that I wanted to draw you to attention to is on paragraph 13, that although there could be some staff affected by this, the advice that we're having is that most of those staff will be able to be accommodated within other positions within the school. So I think that's another factor to bear in mind as part of this process. I'll stop at that point.
Thank you. Ivan.
Thank you, Leader. I think that I need to reiterate the impact of education healthcare assessments on practice within the county. There are some practices that are traditional that no longer can be sustained when you look at what's actually recommended in the EHC. And paragraph 18 makes it quite clear that no pupils attending the school currently have any requirement for residential provision. Given the state of the budget, you've got to look very closely at how you spend and allocate the money. The EHC is the document that the government have brought in which determines what a child with special needs should get. Trevor Pendleton and David Atterbury have both visited Maplewell Hall this week, and Trevor has given me his particular views. We're asking Cabinet for permission to go out and consult, and clearly until we've got the consultation response, we're not going to be able to come back and make a recommendation to you. But for me personally, it is the impact of the EHCP, the Education Healthcare Plan, which will be paramount in determining what resources are allocated to children with special needs in the future. I'll move the motion on the Green Paper.
I think it's you, Richard, isn't it?
Yes, I'll second that, Chairman. It's been clearly expressed by the speakers, the reasons for this, so I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Yep. Moved and seconded. Let's go out to consultation. All in favour? Thank you. Leicester Shire and Rutland Local Safeguarding Board, Children Board and Safeguarding Adult Board Annual Reports 1617, pages 57 to 62 and Appendix Pack 71 to 194. I'd like to welcome you, Simon, you're the independent chairman of the Safeguarding Boards to this Cabinet meeting. This is your first meeting since taking over, I understand. You'll see when you speak, we've got comments from 2 scrutiny committees, Adults and Communities and Children and Families. They're appended to the order paper. They're marked 9A and 9B. So welcome, Simon, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You're correct, it is my first meeting as a new Chair, and it's important to point out that this report is a retrospective report that covers the period up to March 2017, and therefore the work reflected in it is the work of the former Chair and the business unit, and I'm indebted to them for their support in preparing this report. You're correct, it has been considered by the Children and Adult Scrutiny Committee, and they did raise some points which I have already fed back into the business unit to consider. I wanted to just draw your attention. I think page 60 and 61 of the papers highlight the key messages in the report. I'm not going to repeat them, but I think the overall theme is that in both reports for children and adults, there is a good indication of assurance around safeguarding arrangements, and there is work between agencies generally working well together. It does highlight some areas for improvement, some of which have just been referred to in the previous item around the Ofsted Improvement Plan, and the board will obviously continue to take an interest in monitoring that or the relevant aspects of that are relevant to the board. I was also pleased to see that in the context of that, some of the issues that the board are required to improve on is our performance monitoring, and that's the Children's Board was inspected by Ofsted and judged as good. Nevertheless, there's areas to improve around performance monitoring, and we will continue to do that in terms of the Ofsted Improvement Plan. The other key area was to show the board's impact of its engagement with young people. We've got good engagement with young people, but it's what differences that make and how do we show that, and that's something that we continue to do this year. In relation to adults, there are a couple of areas that are continuing, the board's continuing to scrutinise. One is around the safeguarding inquiries within health settings, and that's a continuing process to make sure that the notifications are received by the local authority as the statutory body, and that those are acted upon appropriately. And also, the report highlights the need to raise a profile and understanding around financial and domestic abuse for older people. It's clearly something that people are aware of, but it is an area where we feel it's probably underreported and reported within the public domain. I don't know if I don't really think I need to say more. The report's fairly self-explanatory. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Simon. Ivan.
Thank you, Chair. And in moving the motion on the Green Order paper, I will only be speaking to the children's part of the report. It was very well discussed at scrutiny on Monday afternoon, given a very good airing. Particularly impressed with some of the questions that came from members of Overview and Scrutiny that day. I've read the report. I was attending as a participating observer of the board meetings over the period that Simon refers to. I'd recommend to Cabinet that we accept the report, and I look forward to making as good a relationship with Simon as I had with the previous Chair, Paul Burnett.
Yeah, he was good. Okay, Rich.
Thank you, Chairman. In my role as adults responsibility, I'm very pleased with the work that Simon has done. Welcome already. We've obviously dealt with each other over the first scrutiny meeting just referred to for adults earlier this week. A very good meeting with lots of areas to raise. I mean, it's an incredibly complex area, and you seem to have picked up all the important bits straight away. So I'm very happy to second recommendations on page 3 and 4 of the Green Order paper.
Anything you want to add, Simon?
No, just to reiterate that I suppose in the report there are a couple of things to be aware of for the future. One is the Children's Social Work Act in relation to the Children's Board will introduce new guidance in the autumn. We already have a process to consider that guidance, and we'll be bringing forward proposals for the arrangements for safeguarding children. In the light of that, what that does is changes the statutory arrangements, and therefore we need to look in the round at the safeguarding arrangements across both boards. So in next year's annual report, obviously that will reflect some of those things, but you would anticipate that there'll be further papers around those arrangements.
Sure. Thank you, Simon. So moved by Ivan, seconded by Rich. All in favour? Thank you. Good luck with it, Simon. We had a great relationship with your predecessor, and I'm sure we'll have the same with you. Proposals of 14 we're on now, in case you didn't know. Proposals with the implementation of the Communities and Wellbeing Strategy, pages 97 to 108, and Appendix Pack 323 to 420. This report details the work undertaken to implement the strategy, 16 to 20, seeks our approval to progress a number of actions to enable the next phase of implementation. Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny has looked at this again earlier in the week. Their draft minute is attached to order paper mark 14. Nigel Thomas, Assistant Director of Strategic Services, will present. Then I'll be coming over to you, Rich. So, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Members will be aware that the Communities and Wellbeing Strategy was published in July 2016, and that's contained in Appendix 1 of the report. And Cabinet at that time authorised the Director of Adults and Communities to develop an implementation plan subject to further report to be made to this committee and Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Like all public services, the financial challenge facing the service is considerable, and this report seeks approval of recommendations outlined in the report that, if successful, will enable the service to meet its MTFS commitments through a mixture of innovation and review of smaller services. In summary, the report makes recommendations that, if approved, will enable the delivery of the strategy to begin, and the key areas are outlined in paragraphs 3, A to G. There's two main areas of work to be undertaken. The first is to authorise the Director to implement smart library technology where possible across 15 of the 16 county-funded libraries. And this is detailed as option 2 of the business case, which is attached as Appendix B of the report. The technology will enable service users to access library facilities without the need for staff being present at all scheduled opening hours, and will also give an opportunity to extend opening hours using the technology. And this has been informed by learning lessons derived through a pilot at Syston Library, and the key messages from that are outlined in paragraphs 35 to 40, and results from customer engagement during the pilot are contained in Appendix C of the report. The implementation of the technology at Syston enabled opening hours to be increased by 30 hours a week, and indicated that the arrangements with the technology installed made no difference as to how easy or difficult it was for customers to access the library. Second major area of work is through the potential to create a business plan for a collections hub, and this would enable public access to a range of cultural services, in particular archival and museum collections, through a single centralised facility which provides secure and environmentally sound storage. And the details are contained in paragraphs 41 to 53 of the report. And it's envisaged that the creation of a centralised facility would support a new staffing model across our archives, creative learning and museum services, releasing the potential for savings from a new shared structure, and enable us to reduce the number of buildings used by the service to house collections. A high-level options appraisal has been undertaken, and the detail of this is contained in paragraph 48 of the report. And Cabinet are asked to approve the development of a full business case, which will be submitted to the Cabinet in 2018 on the development of the hub. In addition to these two areas of work, we also are asking for approval for a range of further work, including any necessary consultation and engagement to review, remodel or possibly decommission a small number of services, and these are outlined in paragraph 57 of the report, and the recommendations for each are detailed in paragraph 3D of the report. And I'll end there. Thank you.
It's you, isn't it, Rich?
Thank you, Chairman. You know, most colleagues will know that I'm very proud of what's happened in this department over the last 4 years, and I'm very pleased to still be associated for the next, hopefully, 4 years. This is equally as challenging as anything else we've done before, as just as many possibilities to go wrong. But I think the central confidence I think I can give you is that we believe we can offer better services and make the savings. Now, that seemed like a tall order 4 years ago when we were looking at community libraries, but again, visiting community libraries recently, they're all so proud of what they've done, and this is a version of it. It's a different version, and has just as many reasons as why from the outside it wouldn't work. But there is Nigel and his team have got an excellent track record, and I think also the comments of scrutiny, which are always very telling in these situations. Scrutiny had faith in the officers and what's being proposed, so I'm very happy to move the recommendations of the Green Order paper.
Yeah, increased opening hours will be quite good. Ivan, you're seconding, I think.
I am indeed seconding it. I've just listened to the comments that have been made, and I agree particularly with what Richard has said. If you think where we were a few years ago to where we are now, and in my own division I've got Market Bosworth Library, which has got a very active group of people working with it, I think what we've achieved has been quite outstanding. So I'm very pleased to second the motion on the Green Order paper.
I have no further speakers. Moved by Rich, seconded by Ivan. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Nigel. We're on to agenda item 15 now, delayed transfers of care, pages 109 to 120 and appendix pack 421 to 424. The report of details revised targets associated with improving delayed transfers of care, which form part of Leicestershire's Better Care Fund plan set by the NHS. The report covers the proposed actions to meet the targets and the associated implications if they are not. Cheryl, who is the Director of Health and Care Integration, will introduce this, and then I'll be calling Rich because Ernie's not here. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The Better Care Fund plan for each Health and Wellbeing Board area is measured using 4 national metrics, one of which is the number of delayed transfers of care from hospital. This is expressed as the number of delayed bed days per 100,000 population. In setting out the national requirements for Better Care Fund plans for 2017-18 and indeed 2018-19, NHS England has requested all areas improve their delayed transfers of care from hospital as a matter of urgency and have requested this be done within this financial year. You will know from recent media coverage that preparations for the winter in health and care are currently a very hot topic. This request to improve targets was not made until July 2017, and there has been disagreement between NHS England and the LGA about the imposition of this target, especially that the expectation is that significant improvements will be made in such a short space of time. So this report summarises how the target for Leicestershire has been set in the context of our current performance, and it confirms the rate of improvement that we are setting out for 17-18, along with the associated risks. The report also highlights how the Better Care Fund pooled budget is being used to support improvements in delayed transfers of care. This includes specific investments using the new social care grant that was announced by the government in March. So in paragraphs 22 and 23 of the report, you can see that 11.4 million of the Better Care Fund pooled budget is being used recurrently to support people leaving hospital and improve delayed transfers of care. A further 5 million from the non-recurrent adult social care grant has also been prioritised to this objective, and this has been agreed with our NHS partners. In paragraphs 26 to 30 of the report, we confirm that the improvement to be made locally has been profiled between July and 2018, March 2018, at which point the health and care system in LLR, that's Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, intends to have met the target. However, this is 4 months after NHS England has requested the target to be achieved. NHS England has requested this improvement be made by November. And on page 114 of your Cabinet papers, the data and graph clearly show the trajectory to achieve the required level of performance is not achieved until March 2018. So paragraphs 31 to 35 of the report talk about the current performance in relation to delayed transfers of care. In summary, local authority-related delays remain low, especially at our acute trust, University Hospitals of Leicester, while NHS-related delays, particularly at non-acute sites, are the area where the most improvement is needed. The Adult Social Care Department is working intensively with NHS colleagues to ensure all possible steps are taken to achieve an improved performance as a health and care system. It cannot be emphasised enough that this is a joint target, and achieving the target relies on high levels of collaboration to identify and tackle the issues and implement the solutions. This is a piece of work being undertaken by the entire health and care system. I think it's important now to turn to some of the risks associated with our current position. Paragraphs 36 to 38 of the report highlight that, along with routine performance management through NHS England, the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, will be involved in reviewing areas that have poor performance on delayed transfers of care. Although we understand no parts of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland are likely to be included in the first phase of these reviews, we have committed to doing our own local assessment anyway, using the methodology that the CQC has provided. In paragraphs 46 to 50 and in Appendix B, you will see that we've highlighted the risks in relation to the delayed transfers of care target. These have been fully assessed and they have been added to the Better Care Fund Risk Register. Appendix B is the extract of that register. And looking at paragraph 36B, it is also noted that the National Technical Guidance for the Better Care Fund states that poor performing areas could have their social care grant funding placed at risk from 2018-19. If this was to happen, it would clearly have a detrimental effect on the transformation work that the local authority is already supporting with the NHS using these funds. And as noted earlier, 5 million of the Adult Social Care Grant has been targeted to these improvements. So the loss of this funding would make achieving the national target even more difficult, and it would also impact upon the Council's MTFS plan. At the Integration Executive meeting on the 7th of September, the group of partners discussed the target and the action plan for improving delays in detail. The group was unanimously in favour of submitting the target profile to March, not November, as it was felt this was our realistic target in keeping with all our local plans. It is unclear if our Better Care Fund plan will now be automatically marked not approved or approved with conditions because of this target, and the Integration Executive was made aware of this at its meeting. I should just summarise at this point that if we fail to make sufficient progress between now and November, and again between November and March, a number of things could happen. Escalation and performance management via NHS England. The CQC review process could be enacted, or we could lose the grant funding that I mentioned earlier, although further details about all these matters and how they will be handled are not currently available. The national position has escalated in the last 24 hours, with NHS England placing pressure on CCGs locally and nationally to commit to improvement by November. And this is in the context of overall pressures on urgent care up and down the country. Depending on events over the next few days, the Health and Wellbeing Board may have to review again this delayed transfer of care target at its meeting on the 21st of September. We did submit our Better Care Fund plan on the 8th of September with the target as set out in this paper, following approval of that through the Integration Executive, and the Health and Wellbeing Board is expected to receive a report on that submission at their meeting on the 21st of September. I'll end my report there. Thank you.
Very difficult. That's NHS, isn't it? Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. This is incredibly important. It's a version of the government doing what we do at County Hall all the time, which is actually find ways to make the limited amount of money available be used more effectively. Again, it's what a man or woman on the street would say we should be doing. We should be tied in very closely with the NHS, and indeed we are. So in some ways it's a little bit frustrating, this is. We wanted to make it work as much as the NHS want to make it work. And I've met the people involved from our side, and incredible passion to deliver on this. But there is a target being put in place that we can't meet, and so therefore it would be perverse of us, and it would damage our reputation to go along with, I think, some what areas are and say, yeah, okay, that target's all right, even when we know it isn't. So this is how we do it in Leicestershire. We actually properly consider it. This is the target we can meet. And we've got the people to do it, but not in the timeline they've given us. And to talk about taking away the grant funding when we can meet the targets, but just slightly later, and believe in those targets, would be, well, I think the word is perverse, it would be illogical, because we are doing what we are being asked to do, but the time frame. I understand the government wish to make sure that they're ready for winter. That is, clearly politically, winter is a very difficult time for the NHS. But this doesn't mean we can agree to targets that we can't meet. So I moved the recommendations Green Order paper, but I'd particularly emphasise the end of where you've got A, B, C, D and E, and the key part of it is the second half of E. The Cabinet wholly supports the Local Government Association and County Council Network in resisting NHS England interventions of this sort which seek to impose unrealistic and unachievable targets. Thank you, Chairman.
Who's seconding this? It's Ivan, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. And yes, there's a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board who's had his papers given to him today. I shall look forward to any amendments that come over the next few days. I would echo what Richard has said, Leader. Item E, unrealistic and unachievable targets with a threat, is not the way to get people working together. By all means, challenge. But this is more than challenging. I would just put this down directly to perverseness. And if we've got an agreement locally which only involves a delay of a matter of months, I think, quite frankly, we as a council need to make our view very plain as to what we would expect to happen. It's entirely reasonable what's being proposed in this report, and I'm personally dismayed that NHS are not able to accept it.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, the little E is very important. I mean, I was at the LGA, as I said earlier on yesterday, and there was numerous people complaining about what NHS England has done. And Simon Stevens, who's the chief executive's name was absolute mud down there. I mean, things saying like he's a shroud waver, he's just saying all this stuff because he reckons he's short of money and he's dumping it on us. It was really bad. So I'm happy that he is in here, and it adds weight to the motion. So I'm perfectly happy to support it. So it was moved by Rich, seconded by Ivan. You didn't want to add anything else, did you, Cheryl? Okay, all in favour? Thank you. Welcome, Lonick. Leicestershire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, proposed changes and future programme, pages 121 to 126, Appendix Pack 425 to 432. We seek approval for proposed changes to the pre-submission draft. Then be considered, has to go to full council anyway, so we've got loads of opportunity to talk about minerals and waste. Lonick's going to speak to it, and then it's my responsibility, so I will speak first. Lonick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the key proposed changes really are arising out of the consultations that took place at the end of last year. And the key issues raised was how we deal with the construction and demolition wastes. And that led us to look again at our assumptions and forecasts that we made. And in essence, that's led to a change, the upshot of which is proposing 2 new sites in the plan. One at Ipstock, which is an existing clay site, and one at Husbands, Bosworth, again, which is an existing sand and gravel site. And both those are put forward for consultation, as you said, Chairman, after it goes to full council at the end of this month. And those are just for inert wastes, so that's the soil and excavation material that's coming out. There are some consequential changes, but they're all set out in the appendix for you.
That's great. I've got nothing to add. I'll move the recommendation. Pam?
Sorry, Leader. Yes, I'm happy to second that recommendation.
All in favour? Thanks, Lonick. Are you staying for this one, Pam? You stay in, but you don't speak or vote. That's right, isn't it? Melton Local Plan, Addendum of Focus Changes, Consultation Response, pages 127 to 138, Appendix Pack 433 to 444, seeks Cabinet's approval to respond to the Addendum of Focus... Over to you, Lonnie.
In simple terms, there are two planning consultations here. One is on the Melton Local Plan change, and the other one is on the introduction of a community infrastructure levy. In both cases, there is an obligation for the authorities to consult the County Council for the duty to cooperate issue, and also on the SIL in terms of making sure that they collaborate with the County Council on their infrastructure. The key comments are set out in paragraph 18 in the report. For the minerals local effort, so for Melton Local Plan, to beg your pardon, Melton Local Plan, I think generally we'll be supportive of the strategy and the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road. We are happy that they're prepared to be flexible to see what comes out of the strategic growth plan, and in the case of that needs to be changed the plan. There is a requirement that they ought to make sure that they do provide the infrastructure that's required, particularly around education in rural areas, and also we do support the balance that they've struck between affordable housing and viability. So those are the key messages on the Melton Local Plan. As far as the community infrastructure levy is concerned, this is the first Leicestershire authority that's coming forward formally with a SIL. And again, that needs to be a balanced approach. It needs to be affordable. It can't make development unviable. And paragraph 32 sets out what those proposed rates are going to be, and they range from £25 per square metre to £235 per square metre for residential areas in different zones around the borough. And it also makes a list of those infrastructures to which the SIL will contribute to. Again, the detailed comments are set out, but I think there's just three key issues for you, just highlight. I think the County Council should support, in principle, SIL, providing that it is clear, consistent, fair and efficient, and that's the key thing, and to make sure that they do contribute to the infrastructure that is required. What is unclear in the report is what happens to SIL in the Melton Mowbray urban area. The plan is silent on that. I'm assuming it's a nil rate, zero rate, but they don't state that. And it is important for them to state that because it will have implications on how it relates to the list and Section 106. So that's a question I think we ought to ask. And thirdly, I think we need a better understanding about if and when SIL is collected, how that money is spent on particularly County Council infrastructure requirements. Thank you, Chairman.
Good. I'm moving the recommendations. Richard? Are you seconding, Richard? Thank you. I got you down that you were happy. And I've now got Ivan to speak.
If I read the report correctly, Lonek, I start getting very concerned at paragraph 38, down to paragraph 41. I've got good knowledge of the school capacity issues in Melton, and the notion that you can keep adding houses onto each village when they're in a constrained site and maybe also have conservation limits on what can be done is really important. And I noticed that your words in paragraph 39 in particular, the impact on secondary provision in the Melton urban area given the lack of clarity around the sequence and size of developments to the north and south of the town. I wanted to ask, if I may, Chair, through you, how soon can we expect clarity to aid us in forward planning for school places?
Chairman, I'm not sure whether we're ever going to get absolute clarity on this because it's part of the nature of the plan. This representation that we're making now is nothing new. We've made this to Melton Borough Council a number of times. It's a perennial problem in trying to get a programme and a sequence of events to make sure that the funds come forward. It's better and easier on bigger sites when you can plan one developer building out, but when you've got lots of little sites and sites all over the town, how you coordinate those and how you collect the money and at what point always becomes a little bit difficult. I think it's a fact of life, but we'll try our best to make sure get some clarity from them.
Yes, do your best, because Ivan's watching you. He's always concerned about school places and schools, isn't there? Okay, moved by me, seconded by Rich. All in favour? Pam, of course. Oh, you can vote, Pam, can you? No, you can't. Pam can't vote. That's okay then. Thank you. Local Code of Corporate Governance, pages 139 to 142, and Appendix Pack 445 to 464. Seeks a Cabinet support for revised Local Code of Corporate Governance to be presented again to the County Council for formal approval. Neil Jones, Head of Assurance Services, will introduce the report, and then I shall be calling Richard Shepherd. So over to you, Neil.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm presenting this joint report on behalf of the Directors of Law and Governance and the Director of Corporate Resources. In 2016, CIPFA and SOLACE revised and reissued a document entitled Delivering Good Governance in Local Government Framework. That framework sets the standards for local authority governance in the United Kingdom. It recognises all authorities should develop their own governance arrangements, and one size does not fit all. It allows the County Council to review and account for its own unique approach, whilst demonstrating that it conforms to the framework's 7 core principles and its associated sub-principles. The Council's approach to corporate governance is summarised in section 2 of the appendix, which is page 447 of your pack, and it informs that we have tested our governance arrangements against the revised local code of governance. And the local code, which I'm asking you to approve today, has been developed from gaining a wide range of information and assurances from the Council's directors and corporate functions. It now reflects the Council's own up-to-date governance arrangements and contains references to specific policies, procedures, behaviours, actions and values by which the Council is controlled and governed. The local code has informed the preparation of the Council's annual governance statement, which supports the audited statement of accounts for the financial year 2016-17 and which can now be viewed on the Council's website as a public document. I think that's all I have to say on that report.
Very good. Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to move it. I think the papers explain why it's timely, and I commend it.
And I'm happy to second it, and we have no other speakers. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Agenda item 19, items referred from overview and scrutiny. We have none. Agenda item 20, urgent items. I've told you earlier on we've got an urgent item. Early support and inclusion for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Includes, okay, over to you, Jane. Sorry, Jane Moore is the Assistant Director of Education and Early Help, and you'll tell us what it is, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. The report presented to you this morning is to advise Cabinet of the current position in relation to our early support and inclusion contract the Department has with Memphis, our plan for delivery of those services post-December 2017, and also to note the ongoing criticism and communications from Memphis that's been occurring over the last few months. There's, as you are aware, significant pressure on the Department's budget to ensure that the MTFS savings are met. But alongside this, there is a strong commitment to ensuring that early support services are delivered to children and families assessed as requiring support in order to meet their needs and also reduce demand on specialist and high-cost services. We are concerned that the response from Memphis as a result of our ending our current contract and starting to look at reshaping our services may impact on relationships between the department and children and families with disabilities. However, we are taking steps to both reassure those parents and also engage them as well. The letter from Memphis has been appended to the paper, and it was sent to members of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny as well as MPs in the Leicestershire area. Paragraphs 6 to 8 set out our legal duties for children with SEND and disability. And if I can just take you through the background to the report. The department provides a range of services to children with disabilities and their families, and this does include the commissioning of early support and inclusion. We've been commissioning this support from Memphis since 2003, and in October last year we put together a new specification to go out to tender for the services to be delivered from April 2017. The contract value of that was £170,000. The specification was sent out to tenders, and it's set out in paragraph 15. The procurement process for this tender closed on the 20th of December, and Memphis was the only provider to submit to apply for the contract. The bid from Memphis was accompanied by a letter that stated that, in its opinion, they were unable to provide this service within the budget allocated, and as a result of this, we were unable to award the contract, as it would have been materially different from the contract value stated. Following this, in order to ensure there was no gap in provision, we extended the contract with Memphis, which was due to expire in March 2017, up to the end of December 2017, to make sure there was no gap in provision for children and families. Paragraphs 18 to 22 outline the reviews that we then subsequently undertook to look into the services that were being delivered by Memphis and consider alternative ways of delivering such services. The review, paragraphs 18 to 20 conclude with the overview of how the department intends to deal with referrals going forward. If I can take you to paragraph 23, alongside the review and the commissioning of services from Memphis, the Children and Families Department has been developing its offer to children and young people with disabilities as part of our development of our early help services. And the department is now confident that it is able to deliver the services in the revised specification in-house. This option makes best use of existing resources and seeks to reduce duplication. The department is confident it can deliver those services utilising both existing resources as well as some of the early support and inclusion, and we've set out in paragraph 25 how we intend to do that. Notice has been given to Memphis in respect of the current contract. Following the review in July 2017, Memphis wrote to Mr. Old to request not only a further extension to the contract, but that the County Council go out to retender. We responded to that to say we were unable to do that because it would have been in breach of our contract rules, and we were also advised that following the service review, the County Council was no longer looking to procure such services. Memphis has subsequently raised these concerns in correspondence and through lobbying, as mentioned earlier. So if I can just take you to the recommendations in the Green Order paper, is that the delivery of the early support and inclusion services on the basis of the in-house provision be approved, and that Memphis be advised that the County Council's contract and procedure rules don't allow for further extension, and that the Council is under no obligation to retender the provision as Memphis has requested. Thank you.
Indeed. Ivan.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for agreeing to take this as an urgent item. Anyone who's read the letter will know that I mentioned in it 5 times. Trevor and I both met with Mr. Knight and another member of his committee earlier in the year, with position is quite clear in the way that Jane Moore has outlined it. There isn't a need to recommission this particular approach. What isn't maybe so familiar to members is that the people being selected for that were actually approaching Memphis itself. And I've already mentioned the impact of the Education Healthcare Assessment Plan. That will be the vehicle that will outline what is actually needed in terms of additional support. So I hope you feel able to support the urgent item. I'm certainly going to recommend it to you, and I think then you may like to know that I've already written back to MPs with a covering letter to try and persuade them of the other side of the story to the one that's being presented here.
I'm happy to second it. I think having it in-house would be a lot better. So I've moved by Ivan, seconded by me. Now I'll call Pam.
Thank you. I do have a lot of sympathy with this. I chair Melton Local MENCAP, who obviously work with Memphis, so I'm sorry I didn't declare my interest in that earlier. I do have every sympathy, both with the children and the parents. Any change to the services that those families get and those children get have a much wider impact on the families sometimes than we realise. I do understand the reasoning behind it. I do agree with needing the statement that Ivan spoke about, and I will support the matter.
Okay, moved by Ivan, seconded by me. All in favour? Thank you. The meeting is over. Thank you very much for attending.
Big agenda, that.
Just reading.